Today we journey through a voyage of time and space, where rubber ducks not only swim through water and fly through land, but they swim through the Twilight Zone. So today, I'm not just going to shine light on the Twilight Zone series as a whole, but more of the 80s revival of the original series. Now, the reason why I want to be able to kind of talk about some of these episodes is mostly because the people that have told me that they're fans of the Twilight Zone, I tend to bring up the 80s episodes, and usually when I do, people tend to go, oh, I didn't really like those episodes that much, or I didn't really care too much for them, or even I didn't really take time to watch them. But I feel like a lot of the fans that have been a fan of the series, I feel like they're really missing out on some really great episodes. Now, granted, these 80s revival episodes aren't as good as the original series, but that doesn't mean they should be disregarded. Storytelling wise, I feel like a lot of these episodes are a lot better than Tales from the Dark Side and Tales from the Crypt in my own personal opinion. Now, what's funny is that people who enjoy the Twilight Zone tend to like Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Dark Side. So for people who are fans of the series, I feel like they're missing out on some really great episodes. Now, there are some really out there stories. Some of them are hard to follow, but for the most part, I feel like this revival was pretty decent. And it should get more credit than most people give it for. Now, before I dissect some of these stories and kind of reveal more into this whole revival, let's do a little bit of the history so that way for the people who haven't watched the show can get an idea of the history behind it, or maybe we can do it as a little refresher for some of the people who have sat through many marathons during the New Year's. The first episode aired in 1959 with Rod Serling as a narrator, who was also the one who came up with the show. The series was an anthology, meaning each episode was different. Each episode would have a unique and bizarre premise which resulted in a plot twist ending or made you think deeply about the topic that it went over. The strong point was its ability to tell a memorable story in just under 30 minutes. It became legendary as one of the greatest shows of all time, and I wish I was exaggerating. The series ended in 1964, and then in 1970, Rod Serling created a new series called Night Gallery that had the same premise and idea, only that his introduction involved including a painting, and it would describe or set up what the episode was about. That show ended, and Rod Serling passed away in 1975. With the success of the 1983 film, directed by George Miller, John Landis, Joe Dante, and Spielberg, CBS felt that the audience was ready for the revival that eventually came in 1985, where they remade some of the original stories, but mostly creating new. Now, why I really want to explain more of this series and kind of give it more credit than it should get is not only for the fans who disregarded it, but mostly because I kind of share my own personal memories with this series. Now, I didn't grow up in the 80s to watch these, but I do remember watching these in the morning getting ready for school. I remember being a sophomore in high school, and it was about the fall time. The school year just started. I would wake up in the morning, so it being autumn, it was pretty cold in the house, and the only decent thing to watch on TV that I saw was The Twilight Zone. Because pretty much everything that else was on at the time was probably Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and paid programming. Now, I've seen about every episode of Fresh Prince, so I decided, why not watch The Twilight Zone? Now, like most people, when I clicked on it, I thought it was going to be the original black and white 1960s series. And then, just like what most people would say, I went, oh, this is the 80s one. Now, granted, I still watched it anyways because I can't really sit in the silence while getting dressed. So, something about the intro to this show is just so gorgeous. I really love the intro to this show.
I just remember hearing that intro music with the dark, eerie organs, and it gives that nice mood of bizarre and weird atmosphere as I'm getting dressed and trying to get warm. And not to mention, that song is still playing through my head as I'm walking outside into the school bus. I can kind of feel that autumn breeze brush in and trying to stay warm. I actually like the intro music so much that when I binge watched all 3 seasons, that I don't think I really skip the intro at all. Most commonly, if I'm binge watching a show, I tend to I do like the intro to most TV shows, but after playing episode after episode, there comes a time where I want to just skip in and get to the show. Now, this intro is actually pretty short, so I don't mind listening to it, and it's actually really good and where I want to actually enjoy it. And maybe that's just because it was actually made by the Grateful Dead.
Before I get into the episodes, you know I like to talk about and show you the box or physical copy of what I'm watching. And I really don't understand the mess that they made creating these seasons to DVD. Okay, so season 1 has 6 to 7 episodes on a disc, and there's 6 discs, with a total of 24 episodes. With each episode, they have 2, sometimes 3 stories in an episode, instead of 1 story in 30 minutes, just like how the original series was. So it's convenient that it's like most TV series where it gives you the play all option on the main menu, so you don't have to click on each episode at a time. Now season 2 and 3 are somehow combined into one box set because 2 only has 11 episodes, but 3 has 30. Usually season 1 is the one that has fewer episodes because it's like a pilot series. So it's weird that season 3 has more episodes, yet it was combined with season 2 for a box set instead of 1 being left on its own. Not to mention, season 2 has no play all option. Now, I watch these through my PlayStation, and my controller shuts off every 15 minutes, so I don't have to charge it as often. So, not only do I have to click on each episode, but I have to turn my controller on every time. So you can imagine how tedious it got binge watching. Even season 1 of the 60s series is the same way, and not only do you have to play each one, it goes into the menu of each episode, then you hit play. It is very tedious, and I don't understand why you would want to go to each scene when you can just fast forward it or just skip to the next scene. Why do I need a menu to get to each scene of an episode if it's only 30 minutes? Not even.
So here are some that I personally think are worth watching just to give it a try to see if maybe you'll think the whole series is worth watching. Now, some of these I'm actually going to not only mention to recommend to watch, but a couple of these I kind of make fun of that you don't have to watch. You can probably tell which ones I'm joking with, because there are some really out there ones that you can probably go without watching. But for the most part, I'm going to kind of summarize the plot for the longer episodes, but if it's really short, I'll kind of just basically tell the whole thing. But if it's one of the longer stories, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information so that way I'm not ruining the surprise for you. And if you want to watch these, generally most of these videos are uploaded on YouTube for a full viewing. So if you ever have these, you can definitely look it up for yourself and actually enjoy it. So we're going to start off from the beginning to the end of the series, starting from the very first episode of season 1. And the first story out of this episode is Shatterday, starring Bruce Willis. Now what happens is Bruce Willis is at a bar and he manages to call his house phone only to find out that he's calling himself. So you find out that there's 2 alternate versions of each other. Now I'm not going to ruin what happens, but it does become kind of a good story about bettering yourself. Now the second part of this episode Now, I actually remember watching this one on TV in the morning, so it was very nice to have a second viewing once I got it through the DVD. Now, what happens is that you have your typical housewife, and she has a lot of stress getting everything done and hearing a lot of noise through the kids and her husband. So what ends up happening is she goes to her garden and she finds a device that can stop time. So basically, to shorten this up from dragging out so much, what happens is that she ends up pausing it right before a nuclear devastation. And it's so eerie watching everybody pause, and then as she walks outside, seeing her neighbors and frantic, and only for her to look up and see that the missile is still in the air, just about to land. So it gives you this eerie sensation of, does she sit and live the rest of her life in this frantic freeze frame of horror? Or does she just decide to end it all just by the palm of her hands? It leaves an ambiguous ending, but it gives you something to think about. So I definitely was thinking about this when I went to school that morning.
There's a nice short one called Eye of Newton that has a hilarious devil with a jerry curl that intentionally changes a shirt every other shot that says something with a dark sense of humor that I found very enjoyable and kept me watching. Welcome to Winfield is a nice one that I also recall watching on TV, where Phil from Child's Play 2 tries to claim a man who's trying to beat death, only to be led to a town that seems to be from the 19th century, discovering an entire town has cheated death for decades. In quarantine, before Herschel lost his leg in the zombie apocalypse, he lost his cancer in another apocalypse, to where the new human beings need his help to destroy a comet that is about to demolish Earth for another apocalypse. And at least what he thinks is a comet. Remember that 2009 movie called The Box with Cameron Diaz and James Marsden? No, it's not a comedy. You know, I know usually those two are in comedies, but it was a suspenseful thriller. Okay, look, I know it's a forgettable movie, but that movie was based on an episode called Button Button, which was also based on a short story written by the man who also brought us I Am Legend, and the short episode compared to the movie is actually better. Probably because it was sweet and to the point without having it drag out for 2 hours. A Small Talent for War is another short but powerful one, where an alien comes down to the UN and gives these high-powered politicians 24 hours to convince him to spare them their lives, and the humanity as a whole, only they misunderstand him, which is a very good plot twist, so it's definitely one to check out. Now, for one of my personal favorite ones out of the entire series is one I won't forget watching when I was getting ready for school. Just like the original series, the writer took a great concept and did everything he could to make it good. In the near future, humans live in almost totalitarianism where people are practically free, but there's a flying monitor that roams around and polices the people. The protagonist is found sentenced to a punishment of invisibility for a year, which he claims doesn't sound all too bad, and as the audience he thinks so as well. He gets an imprint on his forehead to indicate that he's invisible. Now, it doesn't mean literally invisibility, but it does mean that people completely ignore as if he doesn't exist. He grabs his own food in public, walks into a ladies' spa, and walks into a free club, and no matter what he does, people ignore him and he gets away with it. So it only shows how powerful the government is to scare people into not responding to all these bizarre things that he's doing. Slowly as the year goes by, he becomes desperate and feels alone. He cries and shouts out for attention, for someone to notice him, and he even gets injured, and when needing medical help, the nurse sees that he has the invisible imprint and cancels her act of helping. It's definitely one to check out, especially when he sees someone else who's also invisible. Need to Know is a story that's somehow a better version of The Happening, and yes, just like The Box, it was a late 2000s horror movie that was easily forgettable. The strange incidents of people of a small town acting weird. You see someone who's weird talking to a normal person, and they whisper into their ear. Then the normal person screams in agony. Then they do the same. It's like a weird contagion. As the protagonist discovers people are revealing the meaning of life, one of the people are on the live radio going to say it. He frantically rushes home to see the radio and turns it off in a nick of time. only to reveal the townspeople were already there with the girl. Chief of Police Marge Gunderson leans into his ear and whispers, just that ending is very bone-chilling and makes this episode rewatchable. In Dealer's Choice, Morgan Freeman witnesses how the devil gets cheated in a card game, and I mean, come on, he is God. And as for the last story of season 1 that I recommend is called Take My Life, Please. No, not the Simpsons episode. This is about a comedian who dies from Gregory at the Hilltop, who claims that his joke was stolen by him. As the comedian finds himself backstage finding out he's dead, forced to perform, he gives every kind of joke to throw out there, and it's nothing but crickets. The more and more he starts to reveal how much of a terrible person he is, the crowd gets bigger and roars louder with laughter. I get the urge to laugh because the laugh track sounds so silly hearing him give a really dark monologue, or if I should just take it seriously because it's really unsettling hearing people laugh at him confessing his sins.
I broke her jaw in 3 places. She had to have surgery.
Moving on to the short season of season 2, Convict's piano was really interesting. A convict is at a prison and finds a piano and he starts to play it, and whatever score that he plays, it takes him back to that time period of it being played. Interestingly enough, he gets swapped into the Roaring Twenties, where a man who framed his cellmate ends up on the piano, teleported to the present day, and trapped in the prison where he belongs, as the protagonist is trapped in the 20s, completely free from prison. Private Channel is about a kid who gets on a plane ride only to have turbulence somehow get his headphones to read people's thoughts. Things turn quickly when he discovers that a man that he sits next to is carrying a bomb and sees that his reasoning is to get back at the airlines for causing the loss of his family. Wait, I guess his way to also get back maybe at Pinhead? Maybe? But as he's about to act, the boy lets him listen to the frightened passengers and he sees visions of their families. And he shouts out and stops in the act of guilt. And for another outstanding one is Toys of Caliban, or Caliban, or however you pronounce that. This one is also one of my personal favorites from this series. This is one that is as tragic as it is horrifying. It's definitely an episode I wouldn't stop thinking about when I went to school after watching it for the first time. We're introduced to a special needs boy raised by his 2 older parents. When it comes to a special needs acting, it can be either really good or really awkward. It's very similar to It's a Good Life from the original series, and I actually thought this was a remake until further into the episode. But the boy is kind of more innocent and not as devious as the other kid from It's a Good Life. The boy has his talent to look at a picture and say bring, and he'll bring the thing in the picture to life. You start to see how it tears the family apart, and you start to sympathize for the family. It changes their lifestyle. They have to lock pictures away and exile him from the public, let alone them having a night out of town and having a social life. One of the most disturbing moments is how they execute him looking at a magazine. He manages to bring a science magazine he saw, and his mother walks in the back turned. He turns around, revealing that he's playing with the human heart, as she ironically dies of a heart attack. The father reveals more disturbing incidences to a CPS representative to explain why he is the way he is, only for him to see a picture of his mother and bring her as her corpse appears in the living room. It's so horrifying and executed so well that it has a bittersweet ending that hits hard when it's over. Remember that gang leader I talked about from the Bad Boys episode? Well, he challenges a man with magic grits to shoot some pool with him, if you can believe that.
I don't know. I'm a fast cook, I guess.
Love is Blind was a nice story about a man who walks into a bar and you see him kind of at ease and you're wondering what he's doing. He starts to listen to a blind man play music And you start to wonder why he's so drawn and attached to him. And then until you realize the blind man warns him not to shoot the man that is talking to his wife on the other side of the bar. Now, this ends up being one of those really learned a lesson kind of story, but it's kind of mysterious, and it was a very simple concept that it was actually pretty executed well with a happier note than the most. And the last story of the series is called Crazy as a Soup Sandwich. This episode is so wacky, I couldn't help but like it. The color scheme and special effects makes it look like a comic book along with the 1930s and 1940s kind of dress style. A little bit of it reminds me of Dick Tracy, a gangster played by Wayne Robson. And can we appreciate Mr. Robson for a minute? I mean, I remember this man being able to perform with Slappy, and I always loved it when he did the word game on the Red Green Show.
The man who slept with your mother.
Could you be more specific?
All right, Mike. If your wife has kids, you'll be...
Long gone.
Okay, it's a restaurant, okay? It's a restaurant. You go in the restaurant, the waitress comes over to...
Hassle me.
Mike, she's friendly. She says, "Can I something you?"
Well, how friendly is she?
But anyways, he is in need of escape from a demon who he then is protected by a mob boss, who then gets help from a hairstylist who also knows a thing or two about witchcraft. Yeah, sounds pretty balls to the wall just by hearing that. It's definitely an episode not to take seriously.
Now, there's plenty of stories that I can definitely add, but the ones that I've mentioned I feel like are ones that you should really use to kind of scratch the surface, to kind of dig into, kind of the better, and these are kind of the best ones and my personal favorites, so that way if you don't like these, don't even bother watching the rest of the show. But if you happen to like these, there's going to be some ones that are just as good, and there's some that I thought were kind of iffy that other people have praised, so it's kind of something to get your own personal opinion on. And then after having your own personal opinion, you might be able to decide if it's worth viewing. But on the other hand, don't watch the 2002 revival. Just don't avoid it as far as possible. That deserves to stay in its own fifth dimension. Hell, even sixth dimension, if that's even a thing. So if you give some of these episodes a chance, let me know down below on the comment section what you thought of this 80s revival. Did you like it? If not, why didn't you like it? And if not, what are some possible episodes that you really enjoyed out of the 60s series? Or if you did watch some of these 80s episodes, which one of those were your favorite? So I will make sure I will see you next time through the wonders and mysteries of YouTube. You know, the internet YouTube, not the Twilight Zone. Why would you think I would even say that? That wouldn't make any sense.